Hi, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com. Today we're going to make a homemade pizza, and this is what it looks like. The pizza has wonderfully crisp edges, yet soft and chewy. And then our toppings today are going to be a homemade tomato sauce, some fresh mozzarella, and some fresh basil. So we're going to first make our dough. This is a no-knead pizza dough, so it's so easy to make. The only thing is it has a long fermentation or proofing, so you will have to start this recipe the day before you want to make pizza. So in a large bowl, I have, first, if you have a scale, please use it here. You know, it's so much more accurate to weigh everything. So you will need, in a large bowl, first 400 grams, which is 3 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. You may know that is plain flour. And to that, I'm adding 100 grams, which is about 3/4 of a cup of unbleached bread flour. Now, you know, you can vary the flours. I like a combination of the all-purpose and the bread flour because that gives you a nice soft dough, but yet it still has a little bit of chew. If you want your pizza to be a little more chewy, the dough a little more chewy, you could add a little more bread flour, less all-purpose. You know, you can play with it and see what you like. And to that, what I'm going to do is add just 1 gram, 1/4 of a teaspoon of, now you can use an active dry yeast here, or if you have the SAF red instant yeast, that's good too, either one. And then I'm going to add just 1 gram, which is 1/4 of a teaspoon of dry malt diastatic powder. And the reason I'm doing that, just a little, is it breaks down the starch, which gives some sugar for the yeast to feed on with this long fermentation period. But I'm only using a little bit, and you know, if you don't have it in the house, then just use 1/4 of a teaspoon of just regular granulated white sugar. And then salt. You want to use 12 grams, which is, depending on the type of salt you use, if you're using a coarse kosher salt, that would be about 2 teaspoons. If you want to use like a fine sea salt, for 12 grams, you'd have to use about 2 1/4 teaspoons. So that's why I like to weigh. So now I'm just using my hand here to stir it all together. This is such a great dough, especially if you're new to bread making. And then just kind of make a well in the center. And I'm going to pour in 350 grams, which is about 1.5 cups of filtered water. And I'm using just room temperature water here. Just pour that in. Now there's a couple ways to mix this. You could just use a wooden spoon. You could just use your hand. I'm using, if you have one of these plastic scrapers, I'm just going to use that. Because really the purpose here is to moisten all the flour, to hydrate the flour. You don't want any dry like pieces of flour. You want to make sure everything, all the flour is moistened. So whatever you have at home, you can use. So kind of just move it around. And then what I like to do, if you have one of these bench scrapers, handy tool to have, how I like to get it all hydrated is I cut a little bit off, and then I put it into the center. And then I just work my way, keep doing that. Just keep working it until all the flour is wet. Now, if you have ever gone to the joybaking.com website and made the French baguette recipe, you will notice that I do this for that recipe as well. Okay, so that looks good. Just kind of cut into your dough Don't pull it, but cut in, and just to make sure that there's no like dry patches of flour. Mine seems fine. So now, and as you can see, it's kind of a rough mixture there. You don't really want a nice smooth, you want it kind of rough. So what I'm going to do is just put a little bit, I'm just using like a vegetable oil, whatever you have in the house. You want a flavorless oil. Put a little in there because I want to just grease my bowl. I didn't bother to wash it, but you could wash it if you want. And then put this in like that. And then I'm going to flip it so that there's a light coating of oil on the top, which prevents your dough from drying out. And now what we want to do is just cover it with some plastic wrap. Now, at this point, there's no kneading, no like with the baguette, we kind of stretch the dough. We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to let it sit. But we have to let it sit a long time, just at room temperature. So, depending on, how warm or cool your kitchen is, it can take anywhere from say 12 hours to say 16, 18 hours. Room temperature, by that I mean 72 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 22 degrees Celsius. Then it would take maybe 12 to 14 hours. Of course, if it's warmer, less, cooler, more. So time is kind of a variable, but what you're looking for, because I made one last night, this is what you're looking for. Time is just, a guide. What you're looking for is your dough will rise at least double, maybe a little more, and see all those bubbles on the surface. That's what you're looking for, and that's when you know it's done. So what I do as for a time frame, usually I make my dough the night before. So then I can get up in the morning, and what we're going to do is divide the dough, and then I can wrap it up and put it into the fridge. You could make your pizza right away, but great part about this dough, we can cover it and put it in the fridge for up to 3 days. So you can make this like on the weekend, on Sunday, and then you could have pizza during the week. And who doesn't like that? So now, I'm just going to loosen that and then have a well-floured surface. This is a soft dough. If you do make bread, you will notice that this is a lot, it's a pretty soft bread dough. So what I do is put it up the top on the bottom now, and then generously flour. We are going to divide this into 4 equal pieces. Scale, excellent. I mean, you don't need a scale, but if you want to be real accurate, which I like to do, you can use your scale. So this will make 4 pizzas, 10-inch pizzas, which is 25 centimeters. So I'm just using my scraper. So if you're using your scale, it'd be about 210, 215 grams for each round. Cut your dough. Don't rip it. You don't want to stretch it too much. So that's why either a knife or one of these bench scrapers is really good. Okay, that's good. So now, isn't so bad. Have your surface well floured, and we're going to work with 1 piece at a dough at a time. So just kind of pat it down gently. You don't want to really deflate this dough. And then, so I have kind of a square, I guess. What I'm going to do is take the corners and put everything into the center, because we're going to make a little round. So like that, and then just kind of pinch it gently, and then flip it over and take the palm of your hand, just like that. You get a little surface tension on there, and that's it. Now, if you wanted, you can actually, we could preheat our oven, let these sit out, and we could make our pizza right away. So if you want to do that, just, I flour a baking sheet or whatever you have, and then just put your round on there. Now, if it's really sticky, then put a little bit of flour. And then you could just cover it like that and let it sit while you preheat your oven. That's typically not what I do. I usually make my pizza dough ahead of time, and then what I do is just take a piece of plastic wrap, put that in there, wrap it up like that, and then I put it into the fridge. Like I said, for up to 3 days, so then I can just, when I feel like it, I can make pizza. So we're just gonna carry on with the other pieces of dough, same thing. And then, when we come back, we're going to make our homemade tomato sauce. So now for our no-cook tomato sauce. You will need a container, and I start with one 28-ounce, which is about 800 grams, of crushed tomatoes. Actually, this one is crushed tomatoes with a little added puree, but either one. And I just put that in here. Now, some people, the other choice, if you can't find crushed tomatoes, is to just use a can, 28-ounce, 800 grams, of like a, maybe a plum tomato, and then use your immersion blender or food processor or blender of some type, and then just puree that until you have nice sauce like this. Thing about a pizza, you don't want a really thick sauce because then it takes the pizza too long to bake and that affects the crust. So you want a fairly thin tomato sauce. So to that, I like to doctor it up a bit. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of a red wine vinegar, jazzes it up. And then I like to add about 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and then I like to add up to, say, 1/8 to 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper flakes. And then, the acidity of the tomatoes, I always like to add about 1/2 teaspoon of just granulated white sugar. I find just a little bit of sugar helps. Even when I'm making like a cooked tomato sauce, I add just a little bit of sugar. Cut through that acidity. And that's all I do, and then I stir it all together. Now, you could add, some dried herbs like basil or oregano. You could add some garlic powder or cut up finely minced 1 or 2 garlic cloves. But my preference is just a really good tomato sauce, not a lot of extra flavors in there. And so really that's it. How easy is that? So what you can do is you can make this ahead. The great thing is you can I just put it in one of these containers, put it into the fridge. It'll last 7 to 10 days in the fridge, or you can even freeze it for quite a few months. So that's our tomato sauce done. Now, when you are ready to bake your pizza, you need to preheat your oven. The biggest challenge of making your pizza at home is how do you get the crust, the top and bottom crust, nice and crisp, because it's not like a restaurant that they have their pizza ovens that go to really high temperatures. We gotta kind of work with what we've got. So for your oven, whether you have an electric oven or a gas oven, now I will say you may have to experiment with your oven with rack placement and all that to see what works best, but I'll give you what I do. I put my rack 10 inches, which is 25 centimeters, from my top broiler. And then I like to have a pizza stone, because if you have a pizza stone, it gets really hot and it helps get that bottom crust nice and crisp. So that's what you do. And what we're going to do is you want to preheat your oven. I would say at least 45 minutes, because that way that stone will get really hot. And that's what we want for that nice crisp. So you want to put your oven on the highest temperature it will go. I think most home ovens go to about 500 degrees. Mine actually goes to 550, so that's Fahrenheit. So somewhere between 260, 290, or however high your oven goes. And then, so you want to do that for, like I said, about 45 minutes, really hot. And then what you need to do is switch at about 45 minutes or so, switch your oven setting over to the broil, the high broil. Now, for about 10 minutes, and the heat will come from the top and really heat up that stone. Now, if you have an electric oven especially, what I find I have to do is before I switch it over to the broil, I have to open my oven for 10 seconds maybe and get some of that heat out. Don't worry, your stone will stay hot. And that because my broil won't go over for some reason, and depending on your oven, I need to get some of that heat out before my broil will come on. So that's what you need to do. About 45 minutes at 500, 550, 260, 290, and then switch it over for 10 minutes on the broil. And then when we come back, we will make our pizza and bake it. So now we are ready to make our pizza. But first, a couple clarifications. One, when I use the term broil, what I'm referring to is the top heating element. Broil is a North American term for that. And also, I think I said 10 inches to have your oven rack, 25 centimeters, which really I have my oven rack at 8 inches, 20 centimeters from the top of my oven. So when we make our pizza, first thing you want to do is have everything at room temperature. So if you had your pizza dough in the fridge, take it out like at least an hour, 2 hours to make sure it's at room temperature, and have all your toppings at room temperature. That means your tomato sauce and I've also have my mozzarella cheese at room temperature. So first thing, we have to get the pizza from the counter into the oven. So if you have one of these nice handy little pizza peels, pizza boards, whatever you call it, what you want to do is either put flour, or I'm using a fine cornmeal, and that way, because we have to slide the pizza into the oven. So you want to have your board either floured or with the cornmeal so that it slides. Now, if you don't have one of these, you may not. What you can do is just take a large baking sheet, turn it upside down, and then use the back of it, and then just put your flour or cornmeal. So have that. That looks good. And then, so I have my hands. I have my dough, as I said, at room temperature. And this is a soft and sticky dough. We don't want to work it too much. We want to have the bubbles, have some of the air bubbles still in there, so you don't want to, sometimes in a bread dough you want to get rid of all those when you're making. No, we don't. We want to keep them. And I will say I'm not going to be flipping this dough to make a round. You can kind of I want to get it into about a 10-inch, 25 centimeter round. So there's different ways to do that. Some people I don't roll it, because if you roll it, you'll get rid of some of those air bubbles, which we don't want to do. You can kind of just gently kind of stretch it out, or what I do is I kind of just go like this, and like gravity. And then you can kind of, with your knuckles, kind of move it around. I'm not an expert at this, but the best way you can do it, if you have a ruler, you can kind of check. I like the outside of the dough to be a little thicker, so you have a bit of a rim. And as you can see, hopefully you can see, there is some air bubbles. So I'm just almost there. There. Okay, so I'm going to put that on there like so. And then So you want to make sure, shake that, and then it slides. Make sure you have enough because sometimes it sticks, it has, and then you're in a real mess there. So what I like to do is take a little bit of olive oil. This is just my preference. Some people don't like to do that, so you can try it both ways, see what you like. Just around the edges. So, and then the sauce. You don't want a thick layer because, you know, that slows down the baking and all that. You just want a nice thin layer of your sauce. I find, you know, about a quarter of a cup, around 60 grams. You can kind of, but again, you know, this is your pizza, so you can kind of use this as a guide, but you know, you can use pesto is a nice bottom layer as well. And then you want to leave about an inch, 2.5 centimeters there. So just like I said, a nice thin layer. And then I'm going to put, because we're making what is called a margherita pizza. So I'm just going to put some fresh mozzarella. You can use the whole slices like that if you prefer. I actually cut mine up. And again, maybe, I think I'm using about 2.5 ounces, about 75 grams, but hey, that's up to you. Like lots of cheese, not? I mean, there's so many things you can put on this. This is like, you know, in our house, usually the guys like some meat, so you could have some sausage, cooked sausage, you could ham, pepperoni, salami, bacon, you know. So, one more. So that is all I'm going to do. It's what I like, just a plain margarita. We are going to put some fresh basil, but that's when it comes out of the oven. So I'm going to just shake that again to make sure it slides easily. You want to put it in the oven. Now, baking time. I'm going to say for electric oven, gas maybe a little shorter. I'm saying 5 to 7 minutes. But again, what you're looking for is this crust is going to, you want it nice and golden brown. You don't, they'll be like charred pieces, but you don't want them like burnt. So that's what you're looking for, and the cheese be kind of bubbly. So watch it carefully, 5 to 7 minutes. So our pizza is done. Doesn't that look wonderful? And nicely browned crust. Cheese is bubbling. So what I like to do at this point, I like a little more cheese. So I'm going to grate some parmesan over the top. You could use other types of cheese. I mean, experiment. This is your pizza, so whatever you like. And then I like some fresh basil. You know, arugula is very nice as well, but we're doing the classic margarita, so, and you could shred your basil leaves, or I just like to put them whole like that. And there we have our pizza. So I'm going to let this cool for just a few minutes. It's a little hot, and then when we come back, we will try it. If you have a pizza wheel, you could use a knife. And I'm going to cut it into 4 pieces. Now, if you were going to make not just one pizza, if you're going to make more, what you want to do between putting the pizzas in the oven, I like to give it about 5 minutes once you take one out so the oven can heat up again and before you put the next one in. I know your guests may have to wait, but what are you going to do? So I'm just going to try just a little piece here. You know, when you make a pizza dough and you let it, like a no-knead, and you let it ferment for a long time, it really develops the flavor of the dough, which I like. It's a nice flavor. And we kind of used a little bit of bread flour, so it's a nice bit of chew there, but it's soft. You get the nice light because of all those air bubbles. And, you know, the toppings. I like the tomato sauce. I like the classic, but, you know, experiment with whatever you want. Put different toppings. You know, have fun with this. It's not that difficult. You can space it out over a few days, so try it. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.